Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pastured Pig Podcast. It's good to be back on the podcast. We took last week off. You all may have noticed we did not have a podcast over the Thanksgiving week. Took a little break there to enjoy time with family and friends, but we're back at it. While we're talking about breaks, we will be taking a break. I think we'll have today's podcast and two more. So since we release these on Wednesdays, the 24th and the 31st, of course, being right in the middle of holidays, we're not going to have podcasts then. But we'll be firing back up again in January. We'll kick off that following Wednesday and be ready to go with some more great topics, hopefully. Just some updates here on the farm. Those of you that follow our channel probably already know we had a bad farrowing experience, and it's been very discouraging. We lost a total litter of 8 in Merida farrowed, and it's a combination of small things. And again, there's no blame but mine to be placed. The blame is to be placed completely on me. So we're going to redo some things. We're rethinking. In fact, I think it's kind of a square peg in a round hole type concept with my older sows. They're heavier. They're more of a commercial breed with the Hampshire Duroc mix. So we're going to get away from that. In fact, I've got plans to retire all my breeders, all 4 sows. We're going to send them off to freezer camp, and then we're going to be getting some new stock in, working out some arrangements, and I'll detail that more once we get all the details down. But be bringing in more of a heritage line into the farm and try something new there, try a whole new line. Bittersweet. Obviously, hate the fact that we had that loss, but it kind of underscored something I've been thinking I'm going to need to be doing in the past couple years now. So that's what's going on. We've gotten past that. Again, it's sad. I feel bad. Obviously, I hate to lose any animal like that needlessly. The Merida crushed all 8 of them, and she's just so big she just couldn't get up, and again there were some other issues there with my setup. So hopefully we'll get those corrected before we farrow again with this new group, and hopefully we can have some success at some point. So with that being said, our podcast guest today is Jim Chelbowski, and he has really got some neat things going on with value-added finishing on the back end of pastured pig raising. So his charcuterie, his butchering process, all that is just really neat to listen to him talk about, and just some really neat stuff he's got going on. In fact, hopefully one of these days I'd like to go see him. He's not too far away from us. He's maybe 3 or 4 hours north in Pennsylvania, and love to go join him next time he's doing a charcuterie class to check that out. But I won't waste any more of the time telling about Jim. We'll let Jim tell about himself. Tonight I have Jim Chelbowski. Did I get that right, Jim? Jim Chelbowski with DR Smokehouse in New Berlin, PA. And Jim's got some really neat stuff we're going to talk about tonight. A little bit different than what we normally talk about. So welcome, Jim.
Hello, Troy. Just by the way, the DR, which people say it actually stands for doctor.
Doctor, okay. Yeah, I should have asked you about that.
Because in my other life, I'm actually a family physician.
Okay. My bad. That's the problem with Instagram, where everything runs together.
No, it's a common mistake, but it's kind of funny. But
I love it.
That's kind of what I do in my day job.
Dr. Smokehouse. It's funny, when I first saw that in my notes, I thought, no, okay, that could be doctor. That could be an abbreviation. All right. So thanks for clearing that up. So Dr. Smokehouse, I love it. Okay, so So Jim, all right, let's you have an interesting story as to how you got into pastured pigs. It's kind of like a reverse process here. So if you don't mind, give our audience here a taste of how you got into raising pigs on pasture.
Well, about 2008, I started to get into making different cured meats. At first, it was mostly sausage and other things, and then in 2010, I went to a workshop at Most Fun Mangalitsa in New Jersey, and there was a 4 or 5 day workshop with a butcher from Austria who had come over and was demoing stuff. And so when I returned, I decided I'm going to buy a pig, and so I asked around to buy a pig. And I had all these great intentions to make prosciutto and all of this type of thing. Well, when I got my pig, it was actually two things. It was skinned. When we did it at the workshop, we scalded and scraped.
Right. Yeah.
And then it was extremely lean. And I was a little awestruck and didn't know what to do. So I decided the next year that I would start to raise some pigs. Right. So that started me on my journey.
Okay, so in that situation, is this Jim? At that time, are you living in a suburban housing development? Did you have a pig in the backyard, or were you already set up to accommodate that?
So we live in what was once a larger farm. We have about a 7-acre farmette. There's a barn on the property that's a very nice barn. A lot of the part of the property, about a couple acres, was pastured already. It was actually it was used for hay and for corn and different other things at one point. So I had the space, but what I did at first, the first year we literally went to auction, and this part of Pennsylvania, there are a lot of auctions. There's a weekly livestock auction. So we went and we bought two whatever pigs. They were a mixed breed of whatever. And actually had a friend who had what he called a pig tractor. So people are probably familiar with chicken tractors. Mm-hmm. We built this pig tractor, which was about it was 8 feet wide by 12 feet long. It had its own little house in it. When we raised 2 pigs, but we had to pull them around.
Yeah.
So literally we'd move them every couple of days, and that's how I started. After that, I found somebody locally that had the next year had Tamworths, and so I bought some. They were purebred Tamworth Heritage pigs, and then since then I've never looked back on other, if you will, commodity pigs. I've explored raising different pigs, and I've raised a variety. Every year I try to find something new if I can. And then eventually I moved out of the pig tractors, although we still use them. Actually, they've become the hutches for the pigs. And actually it works as a nice service. When we go to slaughter, which I do here, we lure the pigs in there, and I can bring them into the slaughter area and out of the pasture, which is really quite nice.
Oh, yeah. So use it for regular housing, but then also containment for processing. Very good. Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at your Instagram page, and you have a video there of your pigs on pasture, and it looks like the United Nations of pig species.
It is. This year I have quite the collection of pigs.
Yeah. I saw a manga in there. I saw looks like a Michon in there somewhere. And
Yep. I have a Michon. I have a large Tamworth. I've got a couple of Herefords, and a couple of Hampshire Yorkshire crosses this year.
So I probably know the answer to this, but why did you steer away from production breed and kind of fall into the heritage line?
Well, it's interesting. So I'm really into all of the charcuterie. So you really want the fat levels. You want the intermuscular marbling that those pigs provide. And as I've actually done some traveling and done workshops in I've been to Italy, I've been to Spain, and kind of experienced those kind of pigs, which are these not always lard breed pigs, but they're the heritage ones, which tend to be fattier.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of where my wheelhouse is, because we're making all these products. If you walked into the bottom of my barn now, there's actually, I think, 13 hams that are hanging as we speak.
Wow.
So, to age a ham for 5 years, it's nice to have that kind of pig with that kind of fat level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's interesting. So, since you're finishing your own hogs and you're processing them yourselves and being heritage breed, are you taking them to a specific weight? Or are there certain characteristics you're waiting to see before you process, or is it simply a calendar situation?
Well, when we first started, we were basically, I would get pigs in the spring and I would take them to November, December, maybe into January, depending on our schedule, and then we would be done until the next year. And then several years ago, a friend of mine, Barry Stolman, convinced me it would be kind of cool to raise a pig that's beyond a year. And he was telling me that he did this in Italy when he lived there. And so he said, we could do that. They do it all the time. I was worried about my equipment. I have a small tractor, and I was worried about hauling it and doing all of this. But anyway, he convinced me, and actually shortly thereafter, I actually ended up going to Italy with him. So we did our first pig now, I guess it would be about almost 4 years ago, where we did a pig that was beyond a year. And that pig happened. We actually called, I don't name most of my pigs, but I happened to call that guy Big. And he was big at 550 pounds, which was for a home processor. That's even for a commercial processor. That's a big pig to deal with.
Oh yeah.
But we were able to. We scalded and scraped it, and it worked out really well. So since that time, I've actually pushed that limit where I'm taking pigs beyond a year.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I assume the benefit of that, of course, is flavor and just texture and all kinds of different. You kind of get in a whole different area there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's exciting. Well. So, obviously tons of questions that are popping in my mind here, but let's try to put this in some sort of train of thought. So what type of equipment do you need for on-farm processing to do the charcuterie that you like? And everything from the process all the way to storage and hanging and all those type of things.
Well, I do mine old school, and in some ways you need it very little, although we've added some things along the way to make our lives easier. So I have a small tractor with a bucket. That's really, really nice to move the pig and to do things. When we scald and scrape, we have an old salvaged bathtub, and literally put that over a fire pit to heat the water. Mm-hmm. And then I actually bought a scalding trough for $25. And although that one, we've retired it since, because it's seen better days. It was work, and a friend of mine built me a new scalding trough, which I'm going to introduce this season. That's really, really nice. So I got a custom scalding trough. But and then we made a tripod out of 4x4s, and we use basically like an engine hoist, a chain hoist to raise the pigs up. To further the processing. So you actually need very little equipment. I don't have any. All of the cutting is done with hand saws and knives.
Okay, I was going to ask.
I don't use even a sawzall. So all of that, the breakdown, even the very large pigs, the breakdown is all by hand.
Excellent. So you're even having by a handsaw then?
Exactly. Yeah. It really, once you get the hang of it, we'll have by handsaw, or I've recently gotten into old school hog splitters, which are giant cleavers. And so we'll do that, but you have to know kind of what you're doing, and so some of my help might get a little bit too too aggressive, and the next thing you know, some of your pork chops are split the wrong way. So
Right.
you have to be a little careful. But really, very little equipment. I think for the home person, you can do it and process very simply. All of my curing is done in the basement of my barn. So I have an area that I'm also a gardener, and I originally built it as a root cellar to store potatoes and whatnot. And so it's pretty simple. It's a walled off, and my barn, that part is in the basement. It's essentially underground. And then we walled that off, and I put some airflow through that, where there's an air intake and an air exit, so there's some good airflow through it. In the most times of the year, well, especially when I'm curing, it'll stay in that 50 to 55 degree range, which is the sweet spot for curing. And so that's kind of how we do most of our stuff. Originally, we would do all of our processing really in the much colder months, December, January. So I also have a smokehouse that we built, and that's an old school smokehouse that just wood fired. So we would hang the pigs in there when there was no smoke, but we would hang the pigs in there.
Yeah.
Along the way, we actually built a walk-in using a cool bot also in the bottom of the barn. So again, we've added things to make our life easier and nicer, but I think for a home processor, it's pretty easy to do. You do need some refrigeration, so you need at least some spare fridge space to store it if the weather takes a warmer turn.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously benefit of seasonal, like our ancestors used to do, but you can get sideways pretty quickly if you're having a 60-degree day or something.
Yes, indeed.
So interesting. So the when you're breaking the pig down, are you finishing? You mentioned your smokehouse. So first of all, is that like a cold smoke process where you have the external fire, so you're actually just smoking? You're not actually heating the meat up.
Yeah. Yes. For certain things. So I actually have the ability, by just adjusting the fire in kind of an old school way, I can completely cold smoke, or I can actually hot smoke. So I actually can finish things like, and the hot smoking would be things like sausage that I want to cook. There's a way that I can do that by just adjusting the fire and literally cooking it. But most of my smoke is primarily in the cold/warm. It depends on whose definition you use. Also depends on the weather, but most of mine is done in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of our bacons and all of that is essentially cold smoked. The bacons and the hams are cold smoked. And then, for the hams that will be cooked, the bacon's fried. So, but all of it's cured in an old, more the old fashioned dry cured method is what we use.
Yeah. So does any of the pig end up in the freezer, or are you curing everything?
Yeah. So my thing, I have 4 sons, although some of them are out of the house now. But my family eats some charcuterie, but if I did the whole pig in charcuterie, we would have enough for forever.
Right. Yeah.
So what we do is some of it's broken down into pork chops. So it depends. Each pig we do a little bit differently. I try to make a decision about what we're going to make. So we make a combination of things. So we'll definitely make pork chops. I make the long cured dried hams, but I also make the smoked hams that are then baked. We make salami, but we also make various fresh sausages, from a simple breakfast sausage to Italian to you name it. We probably have made it or tried it, including we always tend to make a blood sausage every year to celebrate the pig at our harvest.
Yeah, explain blood sausage, because I think there's a good chunk of our listeners that don't fully understand, because I don't fully understand what blood sausage is.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting, and one of the other things that I've explored through the years, and I try to do this at least once a season. I try to make a new blood sausage, and so in different cultures, the blood the blood is used in most of the cultures that had something around the pig. The blood and the different other offal, all the liver and the heart was used, and that was generally used first because it would spoil and didn't keep that much. So most blood sausage is you would take some of the blood and then you would combine it with some type of, I'll just say filler. Mm-hmm. So that filler could be rice, that could be rice, could be barley, could be apples, and so you would mix that with the blood. Onions are used a lot, and so that you tend to blend all that, add some spices, and then that would be then poached, and it turns black. So when blood is cooked, it turns black. So mm-hmm. people might have heard the term black pudding.
Right.
Well, black pudding is a type of blood sausage.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there are different ones all across. It's interesting. Every culture has its own version, which has been fun for us to kind of explore. Not everybody's favorite, but I absolutely love blood sausage. I like exploring different types of blood sausage, and to me, that's the ultimate celebration here of the pig, is to literally do what our ancestors do, and we're I won't say I'm zero waste, but we try to get close to that. We even have harvested other things. We've harvested the intestines at times. Once you've done it a couple times, and I do it for workshops, you realize it's one of those things that it's a lot of work and it's easier to buy unless you have a Spanish grandmother to help you. I was in Spain last year for what is called a La Matanza, which is their slaughter, and I had the wonderful pleasure of doing a traditional one, and they don't buy their casings. They actually harvest the intestines, and I found some great ways, very great, simple ways to use the intestines, which I have done since.
Wow.
I still buy a lot of my casings just because they're nicer, and time. My most precious commodity is time, and if I had enough time, I'd probably do it. That's probably why we end up buying casings, because it's a lot of work to clean them.
Yeah. Now, I assume you're still practicing medicine right now?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously that's a full-time gig.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to go back real quick to your breakdown process. So for those that are thinking about doing their own, we have a lot of homesteaders that are just raising one or two hogs for themselves. So we've talked about some of the equipment. We talked about your hanging and storage. What about the actual breakdown? Are you going in and doing this on the kitchen countertop? Do you have a breakdown room? Are there some specifics there that you think people would need for that?
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate. I have the barn I have on my property. Actually used to be the gentleman that built the barn and the house that I live in was a woodworker. So it was his wood shop, and so it's very spacious, and it's heated, so it's very nice place to break down. We have a large table there that we do it in there, and so we'll hang the pigs. Generally, it depends. I've done what's called hot butchering before, where you literally kill the pig and you're butchering when it's still warm, which is a challenge. That's a lot more work. Just because the pigs are, I'll use the term jiggly,
right?
And
yeah.
so that's a challenge. But normally we'll hang them for a day or two, up to a week, and then when we get back to it, after work or whatever, because we normally will do this in the winter when we harvest. We'll do it on a Saturday, and then sometime that next week in the evening we'll start. My buddy and I usually we'll get together and we'll start to break the pigs down.
Okay. Yeah.
And so with two of us working, usually it's two of us. Sometimes there's more. It depends on if friends are joining or whatnot. We'll start to break down and into the different cuts, and we always have a plan. That's probably the biggest thing I would tell anybody new that wants to break down a pig. Think ahead. Think about what you want. Do a lot of reading, a lot of YouTubing or whatever, and really try to come up with a plan so that you know where you're going with it. That makes a big difference. And I try to either mentally or sometimes I'll write it down what I would like to get out of a certain pig.
Yeah. Okay. Well, excellent. That's great. So, wow, a lot of different directions to take that. I do want to come back real quick and talk about the breeds. Have through everything you've done, have you settled on a specific breed that you say, okay, this produces the best X?
So my favorite is probably Tamworth and or cross with large black. And in fact, I have a gilt now that I've unfortunately been unsuccessful at doing AI on.
Oh, okay.
I'm hoping to try again here. In fact, I was just out feeding the pigs this evening, and she's in standing heat, so I'm going to mark my calendar, and I didn't want to do it anywhere where it's close to the dead of winter. I have farrowed here one time, and that was again, it was more accidental.
Okay.
And I'll give you one really interesting story because it's something else that I've done once and will never do again. So a number of years ago, I had a Cooney gilt, and I had bought a couple of American guinea hogs. Well, when they came to me, they weren't castrated. Or the one wasn't. The one of the males wasn't castrated, and I thought, well, we're going to slaughter him before he gets mature. And this was before I knew about boar taint and all of this other, this was early on, so I my knowledge base wasn't the greatest. And the next thing you know, that Cooney gave birth. And I did actually raise those piglets. In fact, at one point I had the ham of the mother, the baby, and the father to be maybe macabre hanging in the basement, which is nice because I know where my pigs come from, and I can go down there now and I remember that pig.
You're just keeping the family together.
It was, but actually after that, then I learned about boar taint, and I decided, and I had some accomplices to help me, that I would castrate this mature boar. And as one of my friends asked a fellow farmer, asked him, "Have you ever castrated a mature boar?" And the guy just looked at him and said, "Once," and that's all I'll say. It was a challenge. We got through it, but would I ever want to do it again? No.
Yeah, that's a little bit more of a challenge you want to take on. Did you snare him or just corner him, or what'd you end up doing there?
We got him drunk.
There you go. Yep.
And then we got him drunk, and then we did have ties on his mouth and on legs, and I was on the business end working. Since I have a few skills in that department,
that's right. Yep.
But my buddies were doing the hard work, and in fact, I wasn't sure who. I was worried at one point whether my buddy was going to die or the pig was going to die, but actually both came through.
Right.
He did fine, and he did fine, and we eventually harvested him later. Not my buddy, the pig, but
Thanks for clarifying.
we harvested that pig, and actually, and all worked out, but I decided, I don't want to do that ever again. And so I hadn't raised any other pigs, and I didn't really want to have another boar here. So this is the first time I've really dived into the AI thing. So I'm actually learning that process now.
Yeah. I mean, obviously AI is where I focus specifically, and it has its pros and its cons, but it definitely allows you to control when and where and how. So that is a control you like.
Yeah, but so getting back to the breed, so I like the cross of I've had some Tamworth large black crosses before. They grow well. I like the demeanor. The Tamworth is called the bacon pig, and that it's called that because its belly tends to be longer. So I like that breed. I also I've had pure large blacks. I've had a few other ones. I mean, I've had the Mangalitsa's. In fact, I have a couple of hams hanging now of those. I actually have one smaller Mangalitsa that somebody ended up having one, and I'm like, and I'm a sucker for a pig that's around. So I was like, I didn't think I would jump back into that market. But it was interesting. Those pigs were very expensive as even feeders for a long time, and then the prices kind of became more reasonable, and that's when I jumped back into doing those.
Yeah.
So I kind of look around and I like trying the different pigs. I like the personalities. It's fun to raise them. And I'm also finding, certain ones, I don't know, maybe do a little bit better, although all of them seem to do about equally well on pasture. I don't mind if they rip the pasture up. I mean, they're pigs being pigs. I've really tried to also perfect what they eat.
Yeah.
Since I'm the ultimate end user, I've kind of learned a lot about feed and what I call fat texture. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question. Have you come up with your own personal regimen and ingredients, or are you just still testing a lot of things?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the pasture side. I am. I'm starting to find what they like, more than others. Some of it's economical too. I find that you can get the deer pasture mixes, which have a lot of what some of my pasture mixes have, for cheap in the fall when all the deer hunters are done with it.
Right.
But I've really tried to groom the pastures in terms of what they eat and what they like, doing some research that way. Our feed mix, we were in Italy a few years ago, and at a gentleman by the name of Massimo Spigaroli. Massimo is what's called the king of culatello. So culatello, for your listeners that might not have heard of it, it's basically boneless prosciutto.
Okay.
So it's basically one of the muscles that's boned out, and traditionally it's stuffed in a sow's bladder or the own pig's bladder. So the pig is killed, that's boned out, and it's actually cased in that bladder. And the beauty of it is you can slice it. But anyway, Massimo had a mix in Italy that is 50% barley, 25% corn, 15% fava beans, and 10% wheat germ. And so I have a buddy that was able to get similar in a meal, get that milled. The only difference is he couldn't get fava beans, so they actually use field peas.
Okay, yeah, I thought that would be.
That's a ground mix, and then as well in Italy at this place, they actually mix it with water, and it goes into their feed system, and they said the pigs eat it well and there's less waste, and that's what I've kind of found. So I hand feed all my pigs. I don't give them free choice. I feed them twice a day. So I'll go out and every morning and every evening, and basically mix buckets by hand.
Yeah. Okay. Are you soaking at that time?
I am. I'm soaking it at that time. It comes as a ground feed, and I soak it. And then I supplement. So, I get on a good year like this year, it's a really great acorn year. So I have some friends and family that know I do this, and they save acorns for me.
Oh yeah.
Which the pigs absolutely love. I have some woodlot here, and I don't have the pigs on where they are. There's only a couple of trees that I've planted, but they're not really producing yet. But I'll gather acorns here, rake them up. I have some friends and family they'll rake them up, and then I'll supplement it with that. We have there's a local produce place, so any apples or any discarded fruit and veg we get. So I don't dive into other like food waste products, but just the fruit, fruits and vegetables. Pumpkins this time of year, like pumpkins that are going bad they can't sell. So and then we have a large garden, so anything that comes out of the garden that either we don't want or is rotten or whatever goes to the pigs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of variety there is great for them.
Absolutely. And that's what I found, and what I found is because I will butcher for other folks, and so I will butcher and process. A friend will bring a pig, or I'll help them go. I'll go to their place, and we'll break down. And so what I found is that sometimes that will change the texture and the character of the fat. I had a friend, he's a great guy, and he's a cheesemaker, and so he was feeding these pigs basically pure whey and field corn. And while the pigs were gigantic and they were fat, I didn't like the texture of the fat.
Yeah.
You know, it got almost too oily, greasy, and too soft for me. So there are like little variations depending on what they eat. So I think it is, I mean, the breeds themselves have some changes. You know, the AGHs and the Coonies are really, really fatty pigs. And you get lots of lard, but, you know, they're probably a little too fatty for me. I like the bigger pigs that, I don't want to say that are lean, but they're leaner than those pigs.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The old spots are the same way. They're a little bit fattier for me. You know, I mean, I like I said, I don't think I found a pig that I dislike. It's just some I like more.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, as far as all your charcuterie goes, I know we've talked about multiple pigs a year, and your family can only eat so much. And I know there's obviously restrictions on you retailing this in Pennsylvania, and obviously in every state has similar restrictions. So what happens to all of this pork? Where does it go?
So most of it, it's really friends will do this with me. So we have kind of a wide circle of folks that will do that. And so we kind of, we work in, we almost like old school here. So in Pennsylvania, it's really interesting. I don't know if this is a tradition. I grew up in Western PA. It wasn't really a tradition there, and I'm not sure if it is down in West Virginia. But actually, the day after Thanksgiving here in central Pennsylvania was Butcher Day.
Exactly. Yep.
So people would get together, families would get together, everybody would go, and they still do this. There are still, it's kind of it's dying out. Everybody would get together. You've all chipped in, and you all, basically you process whatever, a dozen hogs, and everybody chips in and does that. So we kind of do that to a degree. That's kind of, I'm not really selling it per se. We're basically sharing expenses and working it. And so that's kind of what we've done. I've looked at getting into the business. People have asked me, and it's just, the restrictions, I'm too busy right now. I thought maybe someday I'll do that, that I would make it a business, but for right now, I just enjoy doing what I do, and I enjoy sharing it and working together. And as long as I'm, we're covering the expenses of that, I don't really care beyond that. And that's kind of how it's worked. And people come and, they'll come and help me butcher, and they go home with some meat, and they're happy, and I'm happy.
Yeah. Do you have random strangers show up at various times a year?
We do. With the interesting online community of both, whether it's pastured pig people or whether it's charcuterie people, I've invited people here. In fact, I'm conducting a workshop with a gentleman by the name of Francois Vecchio. So Francois is 82 or 83. I have to think. But anyway, I befriended him a number of years ago as he was traveling through, invited him here. And last year I was able to have him come out here to conduct a 4-day workshop where we slaughtered pigs, and then we did the classic European breakdown. We moved into salami and prosciutto and speck and all of the wonderful preparations. So we actually had a grand time, and everybody really learned a lot, and we were able to convince him to come back again this year. So we're actually doing that in November.
Oh, wow.
And so that is one of my passions is, we're getting together with that community, that you're raising the pigs and you're doing all this stuff and you're making all these wonderful products and learning along the way.
So I assume, for our listeners, your workshop is probably booked up already?
It is. In fact, I had to turn some, I ended up having more help than I needed. And then the student, we actually have some paid students for that class, but it actually filled up relatively quickly. but we're talking already about doing some other ones, or even doing maybe a less intensive or a beginner's workshop. I have some friends that do that now. There's a couple of guys, there's some guys from Hanyun Farm in Ohio. They have some great classes, and they're actually coming to help me. We've become good friends. And there's a couple other folks that do them around the country. This one was really unique. This was more of a, how should I say it? This isn't a beginner's class. This was more people that have been doing it and really want to take it to the next level. But I'll also, when I slaughter during the other times in the winter, if people want to come, I'm always open for, someone to help scrape a pig. I never mind a little excess help.
Right.
And people that come learn.
Yeah, sounds like Red Toolhouse needs to make a road trip north. That sounds like a good time.
You're welcome to come. And I've thought about it in my retirement. There's in Italy there are these guys that travel around to the farms and do harvest. It was really fascinating. We were in Italy. The place that we were learning, he wanted us to show the culture of what traditionally happened. So it was interesting. This was at this farm, and so this is how the culture is so different. These three gentlemen, pull up. They have a trailer. They have all their equipment, and so they killed this pig. This pig was in the 500-pound range probably. And then we learned a technique where you just dump boiling water on the pig in isolated areas. So in other words, you take little tiny bits at a time and you scrape it with a knife right then and there. So as opposed to where most people here in the U.S. dunk them in one capacity or another, but you pour the boiling water and you just scrape, and eventually the hair comes off. But then they process the whole pig. And so traditionally what would happen is they would do that for a family, and they would even break it all the way down and make salami. Like if you don't want to do your own, you raise the pig, they come and do that. And it's interesting, in Italy, in that part, the state actually sends out a veterinarian. And the veterinarian inspects the pig, takes a sample, basically not in any punitive way. It's just to make sure that it's healthy. Mm-hmm. So really fascinating, like a different cultural shift.
Yeah.
Because that was what was traditionally done. And so who knows? I thought about that. That would be, I've not really done many. Well, I have done road trip slaughters for really close friends that we've gone. I've not done that as a business or whatever, but maybe someday in my retirement, that's what I'll do, is I'll travel around to small farms and process or something. Who knows?
Yeah. That sounds like a good setup.
But yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome to come up if you ever want to make a road trip. We're not that terribly far from you. Like I said, I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. So.
Oh yeah. I think I can get to Central PA in 3-4 hours, I believe. So it's not too bad. It's definitely a different side of that. And like I said, I think I try to stick to traditional old school methods in terms of how we process and how we do things. Yeah, excellent. Well, may take you up on that. Yeah, we've been known to just show up on people's doors. We were in Vermont a couple months ago, just popped in on some people. So
fantastic. Yeah, well, like I said, we are here, and we do enjoy that side of it. The many people that I've met and become friends with what we've talked about, the community is really just great people. My wife has always said that too. Like, just people are just super nice, and just a great group of people to have. And so we also try to turn our slaughters into a party, if you will. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we'll have a slaughter in the morning, and then we'll have as I said, this barn is heated, so we'll usually in the wintertime, a couple times a year, we'll have some music and have a good old fashioned hoedown, if you will, in the barn, and it just makes for a wonderful day. If you kind of combine that, you're working hard and then you're having a good time, and then that's where we pull out a lot of the the processed charcuterie from probably the previous year. We'll pull out the hams, some of which are a couple of years old to whatever. That's the beauty with charcuterie. It keeps for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's traditionally why it was done. I mean, it's a method of preservation that's wonderful.
Very good. Awesome. Well, Jim, as we wrap up, what do you see in the future at your place? Are there areas that you want to expand specifically? Or 5-year plan, 10-year plan, hanging up the stethoscope and picking up the cleaver full time?
Well, yeah, I would like to at some point. I want to transition to probably working as a part-time doctor and part-time farmer / butcher. I don't know that I want to turn it into a full-blown business. Maybe then it would become too much like work. I do like the idea of doing like the workshops or even working for somebody part-time and maybe coming up with a business plan with somebody where I would do a lot of the processing or helping out. But I haven't quite figured that out yet. I do realize that my pasture, I currently have 12 pigs on pasture right now, and they're pretty mature, and that's pushing the limits unless I really would expand my pastures. And I'm not sure that I want to do that. So I'm not exactly sure where I want to go, but we'll see. We'll see over time what we decide to do.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. This is very interesting. I think we could talk for another hour, but for our listeners' sake, I think we'll tie a bow on it here. But if anybody wants to find more information about your setup, where can they find you online?
Well, I do most of my stuff now on Instagram. I find with my time commitments, that's the easiest place for me to post something.
Sure.
I'm Dr. Smokehouse, as you said,
right.
on Instagram. I'm also on a lot of the pastured pig forums, and then there's a couple of for people that are learning. There's a couple of groups that are meat curing groups. Well, the biggest one is the salt cured pig. The one that Francois has is Salumi Charcuterie. That's another group on Facebook. And most of that community is pretty good about and pretty open to working with beginners and answering questions. So that's kind of where I can be found, on those. I usually kind of patrol those sites every once in a while. But I'm open. Anybody who wants to, contact me, I'm here, and we're always doing something, especially in the winter.
Excellent. All right. Wonderful. Well, Jim, I appreciate your time and excited to possibly head north and help you scrape a pig at some point. We'll definitely have to keep in touch on that. And also, as you set some of these dates for upcoming workshops, keep in touch with me as well. And I can obviously do a shout out here on the podcast to let people know in case they want to reach out and be a part of that as well.
Oh yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I'll definitely stay in touch. And that's what's been. I've already reached out to one of your other folks that you interviewed that lives a little south of here after hearing that it wasn't that far. So it's always neat to find out where people are and meet people from these different communities. It's really just to me that's been one of the greatest pleasures of doing everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great community, definitely. Well, Jim, I appreciate it. I pray you have a good evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Troy.
All right. Take care. Well, all right. Well, I hope everyone appreciated that discussion with Jim. It's funny. Like I said, as you heard there, mispronounced his moniker. He called him DR Smokehouse, the doctor combo. Yeah, you realize afterwards. But really appreciate Jim and him taking the time to talk with us, and it's a good sense of humor there. But if you guys, we're still going to be scheduling interviews, upcoming interviews. So if there's anything, again, if you've been on the podcast before and you want to talk about a specific topic, don't feel like you're not allowed to come back on. Yeah, we'd obviously love to just have some topics. Still trying to line out, the logistics are tricky. Trying to line out multiple interviews at a time where we can actually have some debate about stuff. Farrowing crates, castration, vaccination regimens, all those type of things that are still somewhat controversial in our area, but would love to kind of do a head-to-head type of thing. Not get hateful, not get angry, but just have some really good discussion and good debate there. So if you want to be on the podcast, obviously just go to redtoolhouse.com, click on our Pastured Pig podcast link, and you'll see the little contact form you can use there. And we'll be getting stuff scheduled back in January as well. I actually may schedule a couple in December. That way it could carry me over into January to have content there. So be sure to check that out. Well, again, appreciate everybody listening. Pray everyone have a good week out in the pasture. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.